I'm ready when you are. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. This is good, isn't it? Just wave at me if yeah, wave at me anyway, but especially if you can't hear me. So thank you so much for coming along to listen to me talk about bees. I'm also, so I'm going to, it's really difficult whenever I talk about bees, it's more about what I have to leave out than what I leave in, because it's a vast, huge, enormous subject. So I thought today I'm going to focus on something I think is really important, which is explaining the difference between honeybees, bumblebees and solitary bees, because it's not as obvious as you might think. I'm going to talk to you about pollination, which God, we just take for granted, we really do. But I've got most of this is a photographic slideshow. There are a few words, but not many. And I just want, it's just really, I think, interesting for when you next go out into your gardens to have an idea about that there's not one flower fits all or one pollinator fits all. And you know, I'm not going to show you how to identify bees, but you can at least go out and think, I kind of can get what that bee's doing on that flower now. And at the very end, I hope you'll indulge me, I'm going to read a very little bit from my book. I've just written a book. Well, it's taken me about 7 years, but it was published on Thursday, like proper published. So I'm just going to read a little bit at the end to you from the book. But I'm going to start just by putting things into context. So on a worldwide level, we have some 320,000 flowering plants, and those are just those that have been described. There are many, many more, and they are pollinated by at least 200,000 different species of pollinating animal. I'm going to be focusing on bees today, but there are the ones you'd know: butterflies and moths, beetles, very important, flies, incredibly important, bats and birds in the tropics, but not here, wasps, hoverflies, so many, many different types of pollinators. But it's the bees that do kind of the lion's share of the work. And there are between 20 to 25,000 described species of bee on the planet. The figures vary depending on where your sources are. The thing about bees, a couple of things. Firstly, they are the only group of pollinators that go out specifically to collect pollen to take back to feed their young. So other pollinators pollinate as they're visiting flowers to collect nectar mostly, some of them to munch pollen. But bees also, most bees, not all of them, but most bees are quite hairy. There are other pollinators, there are hairy flies as well, but on the whole, bees, if you think of a bumblebee or a honeybee, there's a lot of hair to gather the pollen, so they take the pollen from plant to plant. But they also have something called floral constancy. So the others might be out on a sunflower one moment and then travel across to Aquilegia the next. Bees, when they are collecting, especially pollen, they're a little bit more fussy about collecting pollen, so they will work sunflowers and then go on to another sunflower and another sunflower. So of course, in the process, they are going to be more likely to pollinate. So the importance of bees, I cannot overstate the importance of bees, and you've probably seen this figure, this 33% or third. Bees are responsible, one way or another, for pollinating around 33% of all the food and beverages. So from a human food chain point of view, they are incredibly important, and that is why their decline is being taken seriously, which is very sad. They're not being taken seriously for their intrinsic value, but their importance to the human food chain and the economy means that bee decline is taken very, very seriously. far more importantly, I think, as well as their intrinsic value, is that they are involved in the pollination of around 80% of all the plants on the planet, which is incredible. And they are key species. Without bees or without pollinators, many of our ecosystems would collapse. And bees are also what's known as indicator species. So you might think of an indicator plant species as telling you something about the soil or the ecosystem, but bees are indicating to us the state of the planet, and they are clearly telling us that all is not well. We would do well to listen to them. Often referred to as the canaries in the mine shaft. So before I dive into bees, I want to talk to you first about some creatures that are not bees. You'll see why in a minute. So this clearly is not a bee. This is a fly, and you would not mistake this for a bee. Nobody would look at that and think, oh, it's a bee. This, a solitary wasp. We have thousands, 4,000 or 5,000 different species of solitary wasp in the UK alone, in Great Britain and Ireland, and this is one of our species of solitary wasp. And again, you wouldn't think that was a bee. What about this one?
Bee fly.
It's not. You might think it's a bee. It's actually a hoverfly. It's actually a drone fly. This is a bee mimic. This is a fly pretending to be a bee. And this is called Batesian mimicry. And the idea, this sort of creatures that have evolved, have developed Batesian mimicry, have done this so that they, in the case of this particular species, it looks like a honeybee. So very like a honeybee. Because it looks like a honeybee, it's less likely to be predated. When birds are flying on the wing and they're catching insects, they don't have time like us to have a look at what's on the plate and make a decision about whether to eat it or not. They have to eat or not. And if it looks like it could be a bee and it might sting them, they might be less likely to catch and eat it. So it's a great strategy. What about this one? It's not a bumblebee. It's not a bumblebee. This is a fly pretending to be specifically a red-tailed bumblebee. So this is species-specific Batesian mimicry. About this one. Again, it's a fly. It's a fly pretending to be a white-tailed bumblebee. And the way you can tell the difference, if I just go back to this one. So the first thing is the eyes, fly eyes. Flies, whether they're mimicking bees or just looking like flies, have great big eyes that meet in the middle. Bees have beautiful ovoid eyes on the sides of their face. And the second thing is, you see the antennae, short, stumpy, hairy. So bees are long and sort of more elegant and not hairy. So that's two giveaways. Another giveaway is the shape. So bees have what we call waspish waists, whereas flies are dumpy. So they don't have a waist. And if you had a magnifying glass, and if you look carefully, you can see this only has one set of wings, whereas bees have two sets of wings that join together. So physiologically they're different, very, very different. So those are, and it's not, if I had a penny for every article I have ever seen in the newspaper that is a beautiful article about bees, bumblebees, honeybees, whatever, and is accompanied by a photograph of a hoverfly, because of course the journalist goes straight for the stock images. I may not be a rich woman, but I'd be able to afford a cup of coffee probably. But it's not just the media. The media are notorious, but also this is a really important book about bees, and it has a fly on its front cover. And the authors, Christopher O'Toole and Anthony Raw, were horrified. This was a second or a third edition that appeared, a library copy or something. And again, publishers just gone straight to a stock image of what they thought. What says bee? It says bee on whatever that stock image site is, but of course it's not. So it's not just you and I. It's not just everyday people who are confused. It's very, very confusing. So what is a bee? What is bee? When I say, people say, what do you do? And I say, I talk about bees, which I do a lot. And if I'm in a gathering somewhere, invariably the person I'm talking to responds with, oh, I know a beekeeper. And I think, oh gosh, I love honeybees. We keep bees. My husband is also a beekeeper, which I'll maybe have time to talk a little bit about later. We keep our bees, natural beekeepers, in log hive and top bar hives. But this whole thing about bees being about honeybees is one of the reasons I do what I do. You know, there are loads of people out there talking about honeybees and beekeeping, thank goodness. Not so many out there flying the flag for the lesser known bees, the bumblebees and the solitary bees. So I say bee, you think honey, you think beekeeper, you think wax comb and beehives, you probably think sting as well. But if I were to give you all coloured pencils and a piece of paper, you'd probably draw me something like this. Again, it's just confusing. So more bumblebee-esque. And bees actually have evolved over 100 million years from, it's thought, from solitary hunting wasps. So their ancestors were solitary wasps. This is going back to the Cretaceous period. And at some stage, a wasp or a group of wasps were out catching their prey. So wasps are carnivores, bees vegetarians, out catching the prey on a flower, and maybe they brought pollen back to the nest, and the pollen turned out to be as nutritious as the dead flies that they would usually bring back, and so we had the first bees, and so many bees, as you know, 20,000 different species have evolved since then. And I'm going to show you some photographs of bees of the world, and these are just photographs that I have borrowed from the internet. These are not my photographs, I'll just say that. So just to give you an idea of the range of sizes. So the one on the left is it's called Megachile Pluto. This has just recently been rediscovered somewhere in, I think in South America. It was thought to be extinct in Chile. Indonesia, and it's thought to have been extinct for the last 100 years, but it's turned up again. It is massive, and although it's not that big, but just to put it into context, the bee in the middle is one of our average-sized bumblebees. So if you think that's a bumblebee you see in your garden, that bee on the left is that much bigger than our bumblebees. The bee on the right is an American Perdita minima. It is the smallest bee in the world, and you would really need a microscope to see it. So size-wise, they come in great range of sizes. And now, I'm not sure, I've got another slide here, and it might move. I'm hoping it will be a video, but forgive me if it's not, because I'm not very technical. But I want to show you, oh, I think it will. This so that you know how tiny harebells are. These are bees on the harebells. These are just outside our front door. So this is our smallest bee, way smaller than a grain of rice. And they're called sometimes harebell bees or campanula bees, but that is the smallest bee we have. And if you ever have those campanula that grow out of walls, they spill out of the walls, lots of beautiful bright blue starry flowers, and if you see lots of little flying insects, the harebell bees on those. So that's those. And oh, okay, the next slide, again, I pinched these from the internet. So that's that size. I'm going to show you colours now. So you think that bumblebee picture, you know, the black, yellow, white striped bee, right? Look at these. None of these have been photoshopped. These are bees of the world. And the ones top left are orchid bees. Top right is an African cuckoo bee. Bottom left, find these in Australia and New Zealand. These are blue-banded carder bees, and bottom right is a sweat bee. So bees come in as many colours as you can think of, not just black, white, and yellow striped bees. So that's. So as I say, so there are about 20,000 bees on the planet. In the UK alone, we have about 280 bees, and this is varying because there are new bees being discovered and described, and also new bees, because of climate change, bees are on the move. There are lots of new bee species like tree bumblebees and ivy bees that are coming into the UK, not as invasive, non-native natural species, but they are arriving naturally. But only one of those bees is the honeybee. You know, we have one honeybee. We have 24 different bumblebees. That kind of depends on whether you count the recent arrivals, recent extinctions, or recent reintroductions, but give or take. And the rest are solitary bees, and you know, that's just this other whole world. So, from a pollination point of view, these bees are all as important as each other. There is no one species of bee that's the most important. You know, the media would have us believe that honeybees. Without honeybees, our food would not be pollinated, and that's not true, but they are incredibly important, especially important for human crops because they can be managed and transported. So they can be taken to where the crops are grown, which has proved their downfall in the United States. You know, now you get billions of bees trucked backwards and forwards all over the States to pollinate the vast monocultures. That's bee farming on that scale. But the other thing about honeybees is that they overwinter in large numbers, so they don't die off. They don't all die off before winter sets in. So the hive, the colony, clusters over winter, feeding off their honey stores, and then when the weather is good and the crops start to flower early in the year, honeybees are there and ready in their, collectively in their billions to go out and pollinate. The others are all still hibernating and only come out in ones and twos, which I'll move on to. Bumblebees I'm going to go into in a little more detail later on, but I just wanted to show you 4 of our UK bumblebees. So top left is the red-tailed bumblebee that fly was mimicking. The photograph I showed you of the fly, that's the red-tailed bumblebee. Top right is the sort of bumblebee you think of when you draw a bumblebee. Bottom left, I just wanted to tell you this because I'm not going to include it later on. This is a male bumblebee, and male bumblebees have moustaches. They have facial hair, so this is how, I'm not going to tell you how to identify bees, but there are still a few around at the moment. But next year, when you're looking at your flowering plants, watch out mid to late summer for bees with moustaches and know that they are males, and that they don't sting. Male bees do not have stings. And the bottom right is the great yellow bumblebee, Bombus distinguendus, very distinguished bumblebee, which is very, very rare. It's been pushed up to the northwest coast of Scotland and Ireland now, and is very, very special. So, and I will come on to why bumblebees have a particular niche as pollinators. And then, I'm not going to be talking about solitary bees, but I just wanted to show you some of our solitary bees, just so you get a feel for the vast variety, the diversity of shape, size. Some of them are quite sort of plump and hairy, some are long and thin, some second down on the left, almost hairless. That's a cuckoo solitary bee that lays its eggs in the nests of other solitary bees. So, and I'll also show you why solitary bees are particularly good pollinators when I come on to show you the flowers. And I mentioned bumblebees. No male bee has a sting. And I just want to show you, this is a bumblebee. It's actually a tree bumblebee. And I want to show you this because she is posturing. And if ever you come across a bee that is tired, has no energy, and it can't fly away, and I get very close to bees with my camera, and if they're not comfortable and they can't fly away, they politely ask me to move out of their space by raising their middle leg. And if I keep coming, they'll raise another middle leg, and they drop them if I back off. But if I actually just go right up close to take a photograph, they will roll on their back and show you their sting. And they're so gentle, they don't want to sting you, they are just posturing. And the males do this, but they're just bluffing as well. But that is, and it's not, do you know, there are videos on the internet of bees high-fiving you, and then it's a lovely thought to think that they might. People actually, they're saying, could you please move back a bit? Not high-fiving. So, on to pollination. I remember this from school, stigmas, styles and ovaries and such like. And the purpose of pollination, the whole point of pollination, is the transfer of the pollen from the male part of the plant to the female part of the plant. So that pollination, fertilization and seed set can take place. And this diagram here shows a plant that is capable of self-pollinating, and that's great. That's fine. You might think we don't need bees for the plants that can self-pollinate. But take a strawberry, so there's strawberries and tomatoes. Imagine a strawberry. Imagine if I were to give you 2 strawberries, and this one had been self-pollinated and this had been cross-pollinated, open-pollinated by an insect. Self-pollinated would be small, green, knobbly. You wouldn't even want to put it in your mouth. So the one that had been cross-pollinated will be red and juicy and larger and sweeter and have a longer shelf life. So that's the importance of basically was genetic diversity of plants. We need territories, and you